I know the difference when someone asked me and it was like a compliment for me to be asked, like, I would love to do this for you. I'm so happy. I feel honored that you chose me, versus ones where I've had to say, I honestly think there's probably somebody that knows you better than me. Right. So any hesitance whatsoever, that is a sign, because the schools are going to be looking for a level of enthusiasm that is communicated from those teachers, an excitement about what it's like to have you in their classroom. And so that should be evident when you actually ask them as well.
It's a great point.
I'm here with Carter Delloro, the co-director of college counseling at the Marymount School of New York. Welcome to Your College Bound Kid podcast YouTube version, Carter.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Carter's agreed to contribute to our frequently asked questions that we get a lot as admissions people, as college counselors. And today's question is, who should I ask to write my teacher recommendations? Carter, take it where you want to go.
Absolutely. So there's a traditional set of advice that I think remains a good rule of thumb, and that is that you want to look for junior year teachers, and that you would want to ask one humanities teacher, which can include English, social studies, and world language, and one STEM teacher coming from math science. And I would say, again, that's a good place to start. And we tell our students that if they are going to ask one humanities teacher and one STEM teacher from junior year, then they don't need to come talk to us. That's a great plan. But I think that ultimately at the end of the day, you want to get the teachers who are going to say the best things about you. And so I've become more and more open to students who are looking to ask a sophomore year teacher, for example, or maybe to double up in humanities or double up in STEM, depending on where the individual students' strengths are. I think that if you're looking at, a junior year English teacher, a junior year history teacher who would both rave about you, and a junior year math teacher who would be fine, I would really seriously think about asking the two humanities teachers for letters. There's a lot of other things to think about. How, I wouldn't ask a performing arts teacher, a visual arts teacher, other electives. I don't think those are really considered as part of the core source for teacher recommendations. I also would generally try to balance a non-traditional one with a traditional one, right? So if you're asking a sophomore year teacher, for example, I'd really try to get a second recommend from a junior year teacher. And of course, there are a bunch of colleges now that will only ask for one teacher recommendation letter. Some ask for just one recommendation letter from anyone in the school, and that could be fulfilled by a counselor. So I still recommend to all students to ask for two. It's the way to keep the most options open as you continue moving forward. But I think you have a little bit more flexibility with how to think about it than that traditional advice would suggest. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree 100%, right? So the most important thing is, do they know you well? Do they like you a lot? And are they a core teacher? Those are the most important things. And at least one being 11th would be ideal. The idea of like one math science and then one, English, history, foreign language, it's a preference, but it's not a requirement. In fact, if it was a requirement, schools would tell you that. And there's a very short list of schools that tell you that. You will see that with Caltech. You will see that with MIT. You will see that with Harvey Mudd. There's a very short list of schools that actually tell you that. If they wanted that, they would tell you that.
Absolutely.
The one thing that I tell people is to be mindful if you are applying to a college that admits by major or even admits by division of studies, because a lot of times for those schools, they do like to see one of the teacher recs be aligned with your area of interest. That can be very different for liberal arts schools. So colleges, some schools admit you into the entire school. Some people call that an open door policy, a place like University of Georgia, Case Western Reserve, some places like that. Very common in the larger school model to admit you into a college or a division of study or a school. And then with some schools, you're getting admitted right into a major. Like those ones that are being admitted into a major, for sure, if you want to be a math major, then there's going to be some desire to see somebody speak to you from that background. So that's the one thing that I add that's a little different for just applying to, a general into the whole college.
No,
Would you agree with that? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's a great addition. I would say, for example, with this math major student, I would think about math. The idea that across 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, that none of those math teachers would be able to speak to your strength and ability in a math classroom would kind of be a red flag, I think, for a college. And so even if it's not the junior year math teacher, finding one of those math teachers, if it's a sophomore year math teacher who you've stayed in touch with, and either formally or informally, something like that. But I do agree that having someone, if you have a dedicated area of interest that you're heading into or that you've spent a lot of time in, you do want to ideally have someone who's going to be able to speak to that in some capacity.
Yeah, some other things are, that aren't necessary, but there might be pluses if this is the case. If somebody knows you in and outside the class, if somebody's taught you twice, colleges can really
Mhm.
like that, and that could be like a ninth, 12th thing because they can speak of growth, that can be something that can be very appealing. If that's the case, be thinking of it from a school's perspective. So colleges are always looking for impact, positive impact. So do you feel that you have had positive impact in the classroom learning environment? Whether that could be helping peers in group projects, or it could be participating in class a lot.
Mhm.
That tends to be something, especially if it's a class with a lot of speaking, like so it's a discussion based history writing class. Like that is something that colleges tend to like, is the person who's a contributor in class. But try to think of that as well. Like from a school's perspective, do I feel like this teacher can speak to how I've positively impacted the learning environment? Also, one thing that I say is when you're asking a teacher, there should be a level of enthusiasm that comes from them, because the best teacher Rex will almost feel like you're doing them a favor by asking. Like their reaction would be that way. Like, and Carter and I have been on that end, school based and to be asked. I know the difference when someone asked me and it was like a compliment for
Mm.
for me to be asked, like, I would love to do this for you, I'm so happy, I feel honored that you chose me, versus ones where I've had to say, I honestly think there's probably somebody that knows you better than me, right?
Mm.
So any hesitance whatsoever, that is a sign, because the schools are going to be looking for a level of enthusiasm that is communicated from those teachers, an excitement about what it's like to have you in their classroom. And so that should be evident when you actually ask them as well.
It's a great point. I'll students when they ask me who I think they should be requesting recommendation letters from, they'll often reference their grade, right? They may say, "Oh, I got this is the best grade I got last year," or something like that. And I'll say that that doesn't matter to me. I'll look for teacher comments, right? Does our school teachers write comments every semester? I'll go in and read what the teacher has to say qualitatively about the student, because sometimes that class where you got a B or a B plus, the teacher may have much stronger and more passionate, enthusiastic things to say about the student. So I agree, Mark. It is more feeling out, sussing out in some way how that enthusiasm is present and how it would come across through the written word of the recommendation letter.
Yeah, no, no, no. All these things are really well said. I mean, your relationship with that person, to sometimes depending on the school that you're at. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Carter, on somebody asking you, "Hey, I'm thinking about this teacher or this teacher." Do you have any thoughts? Do you feel as if you're able to give guidance when somebody does that?
I do. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I'll sort of pull up the I
Comments.
want to see, yeah, see what the
Hmm.
teachers have said about the
Hmm.
student
Sure.
to get a feel for that. But I'll be able to sort of ask. Oftentimes, I can also gauge from the student themselves.
Hmm.
If they feel like I'm asking so and so because I have to ask a STEM teacher, but I really wish I could also ask my English teacher instead. Sometimes my role is to give them permission to do that,
Hmm.
to do the thing that they want to do anyway.
Hmm.
But I do think, if you don't have a school-based counselor that can help you in that level of detail, getting that feedback from, classmates or parents can also be really good if you're not totally sure.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, especially if you're at a place like where Carter is, it's smaller, they know each other. Like sometimes there's a way of a counselor providing a bit of guidance without. I mean, they can't throw anybody under the bus, but they might know. Oh, this person really. I've seen amazing letters from them, and if you're torn between the two, they might say, this one kind of sounds like they might be really good, without saying, I'd avoid this one. So So that kind of like reading between the lines sometimes, listen, this doesn't apply to a lot of people because a lot of people are in big schools where the people, they don't know each other, but it is something, it is something to be aware of, when people are making this decision. One other tip that I give people is, I can't say I came up with this on my own. I learned this from somebody else. People that are good speaking communicators are usually good writing communicators. I had the student this year. I have all kinds of stuff I give people ahead of time. It's very detailed. So normally that's enough for them to really come to the table and kind of know this one or this one. This student legitimately had 4 really good options. Like when I listened to him, I was like, this is like really hard for me to decide between, like, because this is that kind of student that had so many people that were going to have superlatives and built relationships well, had evidence of impact.
Yeah.
So one thing I sometimes will say to people is, how are they as a communicator? If they're good in the speaking part, they're probably good in the writing part as well. Obviously, the most important part is the relationship. And it's not like colleges are giving a test to see who's worthy of some Pulitzer Prize in their writing. Like, it's not about how well the teacher writes. But at the same time, the skill of the person to be able to position somebody is not a non-factor. And so I would say that's another thing you can think of is, do you feel like this person is a good communicator? If you're really torn, that's like test like H or L. It's not the most important thing. I think the other things we've talked about are by far more important. But I just bring it up if you're someone that, well, I feel like I have 4 teachers that check all those boxes,
Yeah.
There are some people that report more and more and more colleges are looking for evidence that even your extracurriculars and things line up with your area of interest. That can be another way for the theme of your application to pop. And it's a whole other conversation for a different question. Once you've picked someone, is there anything that you can do? What do you say to them? Or can you have any influence at all on what they say in an authentic way? But that's another question we'll take in another time. That's a whole different subject that can be very important, but it's beyond the scope of this question. But Carter,
Sure.
I've said all I have to say. Any other thoughts?
No, I think that's great, Mark.
Yep. Thanks again, my friend.
You bet.
See you in the next one.